Are you a great redeemer of time? It's kind of an odd question, but are you somebody who makes the most of the time the Lord's given to you? Now, obviously, I think we could all think about time we waste. We could all use more time better than we already do. And there's probably a lot of time we spend doing stuff that could be better employed differently. I was recently reading a book and I was encouraged by this idea of being known as someone who uses their time well, having a reputation for being a great redeemer of time. And it really got me thinking, and that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. Are you a great redeemer of time? It's sort of a question to ask yourself. Is this something that someone who knows me well would say about me? They use their time well. And what we're talking about really is this idea of reputation, is what are you known for? That's your reputation. And I want to say, I really think reputation matters. Sometimes we can get hung up on this idea of reputation as, well, who cares what people think about me, right? That's sort of like the worldly notion is like, well, stop the haters. Who cares what people think about you? You know who you are. When we look at the scriptures, we do find that reputation is something that does matter. What we're known for is a good proxy for what our actual character is. Why? Well, you're known for the things you say, right? Jesus talked about this, that a good tree can't bear bad fruit. We are out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so the way you talk tells people about your character. We see this other places in scriptures too, that reputation is an important thing. And so striving to have a good reputation will often naturally lead to you actually having the character that produces that reputation. So we see this in Stephen Charnock, and this is really the thing that got me thinking about this. Is I talked about this, if you're on our weekly newsletter, I talked about this, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago. But this is from the preface to the book Divine Providence by Stephen Charnock. It says, "He was a great redeemer of time, rescuing not only his restless hours in the night, but even time spent walking in the streets from those impertinencies and fruitless vanities that often fill up men's minds and steal their hearts away from those better and more noble objects that challenge their thinking on those issues of higher regard." Now that is a long sentence, but basically what's happening here is Stephen Charnock was a Puritan pastor from a long, long ago, and he wrote this book, Divine Providence. It's actually a great book. I would commend it to you right here. Nice red cover. There it is, right side up. Really wonderful book about God's providence. But the preface to the original from whatever, 1600 something, there was a little biography about Charnock, and that was one of his things. He was known. He had a reputation. He was a great redeemer of time. That's how they described him. And it really just got me thinking, imagine if that was on your epitaph. Imagine if that was the thing people remembered about you. They didn't waste time. Now, in Charnock's case, he was a pastor, and so they were talking about that he spent his walks thinking and writing, and even it talked about his restless nights. He didn't waste those moments when he woke up and had insomnia and said, oh, well, maybe I'll just go on Netflix. He didn't have Netflix, but he didn't use it and waste it. He said, oh, wait, this isn't just an inconvenience. This is an opportunity. This time where I need to wait in line for something or walk on a long journey, this isn't time to kill. This is time to reinvest. We see that reputation matters even biblically too. A couple points I'll bring out here is Acts 6:3, when they went to go choose some deacons that would help the apostles when they were overwhelmed. Acts 6:3, it says, "Therefore, brothers, pick out from among you 7 men of good repute, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, who we will appoint to this duty," right? So these people had a good reputation. They were known to be good dudes, solid believers, full of the Spirit. And pick these guys so that we'll appoint them this task to help us. Same thing is true. Reputation matters. 1 Timothy 3:2, when it talks about the qualifications for an elder or an overseer, it says, "Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach." And it goes on from there. Similarly, it talks about that in Titus as well. And this idea is that what is the reputation? If you're going to choose a leader of a church, the place you want to start with is, what are they known for? Are they sober-minded? Are they wise? Do they love money? Are they greedy? And just by way of, I guess, maybe getting off topic a little bit, Something I always want to point out to people, I talk to a lot of young men that are interested in the ministry, and they look at the qualifications for an elder and they see it as a list for self-evaluation. They say, am I these things? Am I sober-minded? Am I greedy for unjust gain? Am I right? That's not the point of the list. The main point of this list is for others, so those who are in the position of the church. It's an external thing to look at another person and judge their character. These are the character qualities, the reputation we would want to see in someone who's spiritually mature enough to be a leader in a church. Anyway, that's sort of a hobby horse for me. But the larger point is reputation. It is important what you're known for, because that tends to be who you actually are, unless you're a hypocrite. And so, what if we strove to be known as people who were great redeemers of time, who didn't waste a moment, who didn't always have our heads buried in our phone just because we were waiting in line, or didn't waste those mad moments at night when we're awake and we're like, I don't know what to do, I'll flip on the TV. What if we didn't just try to acquiesce to just going with the flow, but instead said, every moment I have is a gift from God to be invested for my master. I'm a steward of these moments. How do I redeem it? Well, and I guess this sort of brings us to the next point, which is, what does it actually mean to redeem the time? This is kind of one of those terms that has become a common saying in Christianity, and sometimes people can get lost. Like, what does it literally mean to redeem the time? Because that sounds a little bit weird. We don't really talk like that, how to redeem the time. The phrase comes from Ephesians 5:15 and 16, and this is in the King James Version where we actually get the phrase. It says, starting in verse 15, "See then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil." Let's read that in a more modern version. It says in the ESV, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil." The idea of redeeming the time is simply that you're making the best use of it. That word that is translated redeem or make the best use of, it means to buy back something. To rescue it to better purposes. That's what we're trying to do. And we're doing this, the Apostle Paul says, because the days are evil. Because there's a lot going on, and our work is important, and we can't just go with the flow. We can't just kind of let the stream carry us along. We need to be making the best use of our moments, of our opportunities, of our days, of our seasons of life, because we serve a great master. And again, what I'm arguing is, what if we did this so well that that's what people knew us for? What if you did this so well that people were like, he does not waste a moment, she does not waste a moment. They're not someone who all the time is just burning hours on entertainment or just doing frivolous stuff. They're serious about life. And that says something about you. It even says, we talked about the qualifications for an elder. One of them is that you're well regarded by outsiders, meaning unbelievers. Imagine what a testimony it would be to the unbelieving world if Christians didn't look exactly like the unbelieving world. If it looked like we actually took seriously that there is a God who's put us on a mission, who has a wonderful eternity waiting for us, given us this trust of the gospel message to proclaim to the nations, who's given us these lives to invest for eternity. What if our lives actually looked like we believed that, instead of just like our neighbor? So how might you do something like this? How do you become known for redeeming the time? Well, I'm going to give you 3 sort of big ideas that maybe you can take away from this. The first one is recognize the days are evil, right? We saw this back in Ephesians 5 when we were looking at that passage. It says, redeem the time, for the days are evil. What does this mean? The days are evil? It's talking about the fact, 3 things really. 1, our time is limited. We have a limited amount of time. We all know this. You're going to die. No offense, you are. And you don't know when. And so because your time is limited, you want to redeem it because you don't know how much of it you actually have. We see this even in Moses talks about this in Psalm 90, verse 12. He says, teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. Number our days. We recognize our time is limited. I say, I don't have that long, and that leads to wisdom. And wisdom, as we saw in Ephesians 5, part of walking wise was to redeem the time. Right? These are connected. This is just living wisely. People who are wise don't waste time. But second, we recognize the days are evil. It means our time is limited, sure, but it also means that our enemy is strong, that there is an evil one, that there is, as Peter says in 1 Peter 5:8, tells us to be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Satan is real. Satan wants to knock you out of the fight, right? That's why Paul goes on in Ephesians to talk about the armor of God so that we can stand firm. We put on the full armor of God and the shield of faith, right? Protects us from the evil one. This is this whole idea of watchfulness he just brought up. Watchfulness, like if you picture a guard watching at the gate, it's his job to overlook everything, to make sure that the enemy doesn't sneak attack them. That's this picture. That's a big part of redeeming the time, is recognizing that you are in spiritual warfare, that how you manage your calendar, how you manage your to-do list, how you just manage your time is not merely about getting more stuff done. It's about stewarding your life well in the midst of a spiritual battle. Do you get that? It's so important. So you have to recognize the days are evil. We're not in neutral territory here. So we've seen that we recognize in the days of evil. This is sort of our first thing to be known for as someone who redeems the time. We recognize the days are evil. We do that by recognizing our time is limited, recognize our enemy are strong, and then thirdly, recognizing that our task is important. Right? You want to redeem the time for stuff that matters, right? So if you're in like a dead end job and you kind of just hate it and you're kind of like, I'm not going to try at this. What if you believe that what you're doing doesn't matter? You're not going to like hustle, right? You're not going to care, right? If you've ever been on like a sports team and you're just terrible, your record's awful, like nothing, you can't win a game, you guys can't even put a point on the board, people get demoralized. They say, what's the point? Why should I sprint back and forth across this field or this court? There's no point to this. But when you recognize your task is important, when you're moralized by that, you try harder. You make better use of the time. And believers, we have a more important task than anyone. We have, yes, like I said, the gospel of Jesus Christ to proclaim. We have these lives that we're supposed to be living before the world, lights shining in the world as we represent Christ in our day-to-day walk with him, in our day-to-day work and how we operate with integrity. Yeah, your task's important. Your life matters. What you're doing matters. It matters. And so you've got to redeem the time. You've got to use it wisely. This isn't a cruise that we're on. This is wartime, and we need to take it seriously because we have such an important mission. And so that's really the big picture of how do we become known for redeeming the time? First, we recognize the days are evil. Second, be known for redeeming the time by creating strategies to redeem it. So don't be passive about this, be proactive. We talked about this in last week's episode about making a 5-year plan, is that you want to be proactive. Diligence requires us to plan ahead. And this happens not just at the 5-year level, but at all levels of life. And so really practical stuff. This is why we do episodes on to-do lists. This is why we have courses on this. How do you actually manage your day-to-day tasks? That actually matters. It's not just some quirky little life hack thing. It's part of stewarding your time. And so you start to see these little mundane activities as part of that larger strategy to be known as a person who redeems the time, who doesn't just float through. Do things like a weekly review. How are things going? What do I need to change, right? You're reviewing, you're making sure, how do I improve? How do I constantly get better at redeeming the time? Do things like have a well done statement. You can look back through the archives here, look at our course on Christ-centered life planning, or it's in my book, Redeeming Productivity. We talk about this idea of a well done statement. It's very simple. There's an article on my website if you just want to look up a well done statement. It's the idea of having not just a 5-year plan, but an eternally minded vision statement. This idea of what would I hope Christ would say to me about my faithfulness in these major areas of life. Having something like that, it's strategic, right? It's a document you can look to remind yourself, oh yeah, this is important. I need to redeem the time well. WIP limits. So if you've ever done any sort of agile planning, if you've ever worked on a software team, a lot of people hate this, but like people do Agile or Scrum, and it's just a way of managing projects. We used to do this when I worked in software, and WIP limit stands for work in progress limit. And what it means is that you're saying I can only be working on 1 or 3 projects at a time, right? That the WIP limit is how many projects can you actually have pulled out at one time. And so, for example, I use this as I only work on 1 project at a time. This is a way that helps me focus, helps me make sure that I don't just do things, but I do them really well. I focus, I actually complete them. I redeem the time well by not multitasking, but instead working on one thing at a time. So again, I'm talking here about nitty-gritty strategy and tactics. That's a big part of becoming someone who redeems the time, is not just having this highfalutin spiritual vision of, oh yeah, I need to be serious about redeeming the time, but taking that out of theory and putting it down into practice. And really that's what redeeming productivity is all about. That's why I started all this, is I want to help you have that theology, but I also want to help you practically put this into action. Personal rules, that's the last idea for a strategy. I have a lot of rules like this. Like I don't keep video games on my phone, right? I have rules that are enforced by software too. I don't look at YouTube before 11, right? They're just random little rules. Don't put, some people have don't put your phone in your room, right? All these things are just personal rules. They're just simple strategies to say, hey, I've noticed this thing is a time suck. I've noticed that when I watch TV before bed, I don't sleep as well, which ruins my morning, which means I don't do my devotions. I'm not redeeming my time well, because I've noticed that this is the catalyst for that problem. And so I'm going to change it. I'm going to make a rule about it. Right? It's being incisive and saying, looking at your life and saying, where are the areas where I can buy back time? Where are the areas I'm dumping too much of my time into? Maybe it's video games, maybe it's movies, maybe it's social media, maybe it's your screen time on your phone. Let's look at one third and final way to be known for redeeming the time. And this is 3, look for unexpected opportunities. The specifics of Charnock, the guy I was talking about at the beginning, they talked about in that preface more about how he redeemed his time. And they said what he did is when he went for walks, he would focus his mind on more noble objects, right? He would think deeply about stuff. And so he would kind of utilize time when he was doing something else to redeem that. It's good enough just to go for a walk because he had to go somewhere. But he said, how do I make this even more valuable? And so I think this is a big one. Redeem a walk. There's unexpected opportunities. You can redeem a walk. You can redeem a commute. You can take these areas of life where they're somewhat passive and do other stuff with them. You can pray during your commute or during your walk. You can think really deeply on something that you're trying to work through, whether it's a problem for work or dwelling on an attribute of God and thinking about that, meditating on that, or using that time to call a friend or a family and say, hey, every Thursday I'm in the car. I'm not doing a good job keeping in contact with my sister or my mom or my dad or somebody. And so you say, every Thursday I'm going to redeem that commute by calling them during that time. Or I'm going to take a walk with the dog and I'm going to call my mom, right? There's different ways for you to take these things that you're doing and you're already doing them. So why not double dip a little bit? And that's kind of the next one here is there are unexpected opportunities to double dip, meaning you can get exercise and listen to an audiobook, right? Some of this kind of ways to sort of optimize how you're redeeming your time. Think about those. Those are unexpected opportunities. You can also choose high quality leisure. So the way that you do entertainment, right? Instead of just passive things where you're just watching TV, it's also really entertaining to spend time with friends or family and saying, hey, I'm going to invite people over. It's a little bit harder because I got to clean and maybe I need to make food for everybody. A little bit harder, but it's higher quality. The depth of it is better. The conversation is more fun. It's still entertaining. It's still enjoyable, but it's better for the soul than just watching another episode of that show that we've been binging. And cultivate the life of the mind. And this, I think, is a really big one. I talked about this briefly in the intro to one of my newsletters a few weeks ago. One way we redeem the time is redeeming what we think about. It says in Philippians 4:8, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. I think very often we think redeeming the time means squeezing in a little bit more work here and there. But I think of far more importance is what we spend our time thinking about. When you're in those moments of time when you're like, I'm not fully occupied. You don't need to call somebody. Like I said, you don't need to pray. You don't need to do that. Sometimes what you need to do is just think. Because we are, after all, transformed by the renewing of our minds, aren't we? Romans 12:2. And so I think this way, I think a productive Christian is as concerned with mastering their mind as they are with mastering their calendar. And so being someone who redeems the time, having this reputation of someone who uses the time God's given them well, part of that doesn't look like vicious, busy activity. Part of that looks like cultivating the life of the mind, dwelling on those things that are important because you recognize that through that, God changes your heart. And through that, he changes your actions and your character. And you do become that kind of person who has that reputation, not just of redeeming the time, but of somebody who walks with the Lord, who loves Jesus Christ. And man, that's what I want to be known for, don't you? Well, that's all I have for you this week. I hope that's helpful. I hope that's encouraging. Share any feedback you have with me. You can let me know in a comment on YouTube or on Spotify. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can always subscribe. If you'd rather listen on audio, not look at my face, you can do that on any podcast platform. And if you're listening, you can watch on YouTube if you're like, what does his face look like? Those are your options. Thanks for watching or listening. I will see you again here next week.